Thank you for joining us. I'm Millicent Walker in Lagos. We begin with the latest in Russia's invasion of Ukraine, where Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov says Russian President Vladimir Putin is likely to sign laws to incorporate 4 Ukrainian territories into Russia during the course of the day. Earlier, the upper house of the Russian parliament unanimously ratified legislation to annex the Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia regions, representing around 18% of Ukraine's internationally recognized territory, following a similar vote in the lower house on Monday. But the upper house of Russia's parliament voted today to approve the incorporation of the 4 Ukrainian regions into Russia, as Moscow set about formally annexing the territory seized from Kyiv during the 7-month conflict. In a session held today, the Federation Council unanimously ratified legislation to annex those regions following the similar vote in the state. The documents now pass back to the Kremlin for President Vladimir Putin's final signature to formally annex the regions representing 18% of Ukraine's internationally recognized territory. Now, Russia declared the annexations after holding what it called referendums in occupied areas of Ukraine. Western governments and Kyiv said the votes breached international law and were coercive and non-representative. The Kremlin is yet to formally designate the borders of the new regions, large parts of which are under control of Ukraine's forces. It is still unclear where Russia will demarcate its own international borders once the annexation is complete. And the Ukrainian National Police put out a statement on Telegram saying the Russian army hit Kramatorsk in Ukrainian-controlled Donbass with an S-300 missile today, damaging 5 houses, injuring some residents. A local resident, Marina, said she saw how her elderly neighbor retrieved his wife from underneath the rubble of their house. Other residents had removed a missile part resembling a rocket engine from one of the houses. Police said the missile struck a residential neighborhood at 4 a.m. Local time and reported no deaths in the aftermath. The Donetsk Regional Police Administration reported 40 objects destroyed or damaged by Russian military attacks in the region between October 3rd and 4th. And back to our top story, Ukraine's president signing a decree formally declaring the prospect of any peace talks with his Russian counterpart as impossible, but leaving the door open to talks with Russia. The decree formalized comments made by Mrs. Zelensky over the weekend after President Putin proclaimed 4 partly occupied regions of Ukraine to be part of Russia, a move, of course, announced by the West. Mr. Putin, who turns 70 this week, has dominated Russia's political landscape for more than 2 decades and could run for office 2 more times under constitutional reforms he has presided over, potentially remaining in power until 2036. Well, let's talk to our correspondent, VOA correspondent joining us from Kyiv, Anna Chernikova. She has been giving us the latest with regards to the situation in Russia's Russia's invasion of Ukraine. We will come back to her shortly, but let's take you to Germany, where its latest power producer, RWE, is bringing forward its coal phase-out by 8 years and is ready to end lignite-based electricity generation in 2030 as part of a deal reached with the government. Now, during a press statement in Berlin, Hambeck also said that 2 RWE lignite-fired plants would stay online until March 2024 to ensure Germany's energy security. Germany faces a European-wide energy crisis after Russia slashed gas deliveries following its invasion of Ukraine. Its CEO of the company, Markus Kreber, said that his company was prepping for a very challenging time to offset the impact of the region. Now, the company aims to build 3 GW of gas-fired power plant capacity that is also ready to run on hydrogen, adding it was earmarking coal-fired power plant sites in North Rhine-Westphalia, where the RWE is based for that. Well, the Japanese government sounded a siren in central Tokyo today after North Korea launched the ballistic missile, which flew over the country for the first time in 5 years. Social media footage showed commuters walking round the train station around 7:31 a.m. Japan time with a siren and an announcement being played informing the public that North Korea have seemingly launched a missile. Tokyo said the missile's 4,600-kilometer range may have been the longest distance traveled for a North Korean test flight. Well, South Korea has responded to North Korea's bombing by readying its warplanes for the drills with the U.S. military. South Korea's military said that it had mobilized 4 F-15K fighter jets and dropped a pair of guided bombs on a target off its west coast in what it called a demonstration of precision strike capability against the source of North Korean provocations. The U.S. sent 4 F-16 fighter jets in the drills. Officials in Tokyo and Seoul said the North's ballistic missile flew 4,500 to 4,600 kilometers. This is to a maximum altitude of about 1,000 kilometers. The missile test was the latest in an escalating cycle of muscle flexing in the region. A U.S. aircraft carrier made a port call in South Korea for the first time since 2018 on 23rd September, and North Korea has conducted 5 launches in the last 10 days. Or we'll move away from what's happening there, North Korea, South Korea, and of course the West to Ukraine, where Anna joins us now, VOA's correspondent joining us from Kyiv. Anna, finally good to see you. Talk to us what we're hearing today. Ukrainian president signing a decree ruling out direct peace talks with his Russian counterpart. I mean, why did he decide to put this in writing?
Good evening. Well, as President Zelensky mentioned a couple of months before, that if referendums, so-called referendums, would take place at the temporary occupied territories in Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Luhansk regions, then Ukraine, this would basically create no possibility for any further negotiations. This is what happened on September 30. President Putin officially announced the so-called annexation, and reaction of the Ukrainian officials, Mr. President in particular, was quite expected that no negotiation is possible with President Putin and with Russia while Putin is a president. So this was put in written, and today President Zelensky signed it to make sure that this is not just words, but this is an official position of Ukraine, and this is serious position. So basically, this makes sure that this is not just talks.
But also, Anna, this also doesn't mean that President Zelensky is opposed to negotiations, but just not directly with President Putin, right?
Of course, President Zelensky and Ukrainian military officials as well continue to repeat that anyway, at the very end, negotiation will happen. But again, the conditions of these negotiations are decided right now at the battlefield. And President Zelensky mentioned that any negotiations would be possible to renew when Russia is ready, basically, and Russia has a different leadership, because with this leadership, current leadership, it's not possible. Anyways, everyone understands, and at least here in Ukraine, this is very clear that, as I already said, main negotiation is happening in the battlefield, and exactly the situation at the battlefield would create the particular conditions and particular positions for both sides. Well, of course, everyone again understand that at one point a negotiation would happen. At least they should happen at one point.
And also, Anna, you know, as you mentioned, I mean, Kyiv's troops are advancing in the south and east. What more are we learning about, you know, the successes they're recording?
Yeah, for the past couple of days, Ukrainian forces managed to advance in two directions, in Donetsk direction and in Kherson region as well. So we see that today it was confirmed finally and officially that Ukraine has liberated at least 5 settlements in Kherson region. Might be more, but we just look at the main settlements which are located at this line, the front line. So it might include some additional villages as well. But the territory that was liberated in these past days is quite big, and we can see that Ukrainian forces are trying to advance in couple of different directions towards the city of Kherson itself. And today we are learning that actually these actions are quite active and fightings are quite active, and Ukrainian forces continue its advance. Similar situation is happening in Kharkiv region and Donetsk region. We call it now the Donbas direction. After the liberation of Izium and Kupiansk, these two big cities in the Kharkiv region, it was still a little amount of Kharkiv region under occupation. In this past couple of days, we can see that almost the whole territory of Kharkiv is now liberated and is now under Ukrainian control. Donetsk region is also very very positive for Ukrainian army, the situation there in this past couple of days and weeks. And we can see that Ukrainian forces, especially after the liberation of Liman, which is the central central logistical point in this area, after the liberation, Ukrainian forces managed to get more favorable positions at the front line in the whole Donbas area. And we can see that they are moving now towards the border with Luhansk region.
All right, and you know, the talk had been on that Ukrainian forces are celebrating their recapture of Liman, the important eastern town. But what more can you tell us about Russia's defeat in Ukraine's Donetsk? And this is also to sort of explain to those who are trying to understand where the war stands now, how much grounds Ukraine is gaining from what Russia is putting out there, also saying that more than 200,000 reservists have joined its conscription.
For the moment, we get information that for these past months, Ukrainian forces managed to liberate more than Russian forces occupied in the past couple of months. So I think it's up to 5 months, if I'm not mistaken. So we should understand that for the moment now, Ukrainian forces are quite successful in their actions of liberation of the territories. And the important thing as well, coming back to your question about mobilization efforts by Russia, the thing is that this mobilized people who Russia sent to the front line, most of them, at least this is what we get from the intelligence and from the Ukrainian military officials, and it was the report by the general staff of Ukraine, that these people are not quite prepared, and also there is information from the general staff that these people don't have enough equipment and ammunition, and this creates this the certain picture of this war, because Ukrainian forces are quite clear, and they say this very often, that this is a very different war. It's a war of the 21st century, and this is not war about the amount of people. This is war about the quality of these people, their knowledge and amount of equipment and a type of equipment that soldiers have. And this is important to understand. So it's not, if we look back to the 20th centuries and the Second World War in particular, of course, amount of people made a lot of difference. Even today, if we consider that all this amount of people get, this high-tech equipment and a great knowledge and great learning, they can actually be very effective at the front line. But without these components, it doesn't matter how many people are at the front line. Of course, it creates difficulties for Ukrainian military, the amount of Russian military, but still, the most important is the quality of these forces. And for the moment, we can see that Ukrainian forces continue to advance, meaning that amount do not play a role for the moment. At least we will see how the situation will would change. It would grow at the front line, but this is what we have for the moment.
VOA's Anna Chernikova joining us from Kyiv. Always a pleasure. Thank you. Do continue to stay safe.
Thank you.